In your new book, you document the ways that girls, especially adolescent girls, can express aggression. And it obviously is subtle and indirect. What kind of behaviors are we talking about? Tell me about the kind of things girls use to express aggression.
Well, one of the ways girls can express aggression is without ever opening their mouths. They're very good at rolling their eyes and making noises like every time a kid opens her mouth in the classroom. And these are behaviors which don't break a rule per se, but which very incisively hit the target. The term that's being used now in the popular discussion is relational aggression, and that's any kind of behavior where the perpetrator uses her relationship as a weapon to get what she wants. So I might say to you, you give me that toy or I'm not going to be your friend anymore. And it's the threat of losing that relationship, the fear that you're going to lose my friendship, that makes you give me the toy. But then as girls get older, it becomes not just I'm going to not be your friend anymore, but I'm going to make everyone you know not be your friend anymore, so that you're completely isolated and you have no one. The reason why these aggressions are so painful is that for girls, relationships are critical to their social and moral development, to their healthy development. And so that fear of losing each other and the actual loss itself is really devastating to them.
Now, someone's probably thinking now, how bad can this be? Rolling the eyeballs or spreading rumors. You know, girls will be girls. This is just normal behavior. Yet I was really interested to note that, you know, since the book has come out, and not only has it been hugely successful, that you do chat lines and 100,000 people come, and you're finding women who are 70 years old who are able to relate what happened to them when they were young girls. What does that tell you, the response to this book?
Well, I think there's a lot of things indicated by the response. I think many women for generations have gone through this as girls and have grown into women who believe that they were the only people this ever happened to. And because of that, they blame themselves. When you think you're the only person that was ever hurt in this particular way, you think it's your fault. So I think the popularity of Odd Girl Out is in part due to a sense that, wow, it wasn't just me that it happened to. This is part of a universal pattern of behavior. And this behavior is deeply damaging because, again, girls want friends more than anything in the world, and as they grow older, their friends count more than any other force or influence in their life. And so again, that loss of friendship is to them the most devastating kind of aggression. Girls will often tell me, I wish that somebody would hit me rather than cut me out of a group without a word, because psychologically, the loss is terrible.
Well, explain that even more, because I mean, we've seen situations. I mean, in Canada, we just had a case where, you know, one young girl was deemed to be criminally liable for the suicide another young girl, and that these subtle, under the radar behaviors could lead to that kind of, you know, taking one's life. I mean, is remarkable. I mean, why is this so devastating?
Well, I think the reason why it's devastating, and this really goes back to research that's been done over the last couple decades by feminist psychologists like Carol Gilligan, who have talked about, again, that women and girls appear to be fundamentally oriented to relationships in their lives. That, and she uses, actually, Gilligan uses one, she says, where boys conceptualize trauma as being smothered, girls think about something traumatic as being isolated.
Well, in fact, it was really interesting, because I hadn't thought about it before, that a lot of the new technology that's available, from three-way calling to ICQ, instant messaging, actually facilitates this kind of behavior.
Absolutely. We used to, I think, you know, my parents' generation, even somewhat my generation, we had slam books, a notebook where you wrote nasty things about a girl. Well, now if you've got instant messenger or email, you can circulate a girl's secrets or rumors about her with the press of a button to hundreds upon hundreds of people, who will then forward it in turn to hundreds upon hundreds of people. You can kind of decimate a girl's reputation with the touch of a button.
Mm-hmm. Now, the book is full of both theory but also stories. Among them is your own, where, you know, as a young girl that you were bullied and went on to do a little bullying in your own right. I mean, tell me about both.
Well, I begin the book with the story of when I was 8 years old, when a girl who was a friend of mine and Abby, more popular than I was, for whatever reason, decided that she was going to make other girls run away from me. And it started at lunchtime and recess, and then continued after school when we would go across the street to the community center for dance class, and all she wanted was for me to be alone. Eventually she started telling my friends lies about me so they wouldn't hang out with me. She never lifted a finger against me. She never threatened to hurt me physically. She just wanted me to be isolated. And I think it was the memory of that solitude, and also, in particular, that feeling that I was the only one this had ever happened to, that stayed with me. And it's interesting because when I speak publicly about this issue, I often talk in the beginning about being victimized and how hard that was. I don't get to the story of me being a perpetrator until much later in the narrative, until much later in my talk. And that actually mirrors exactly how I pursued the research, which is to say that I walked around talking about, oh, what a victim I was, until one day I sat down with this old friend of mine and told her all about the book that I was researching. And she said, Rachel, don't you remember what you did to me in the 9th grade? And I looked at her stunned. Well, I had forgotten. I hadn't really forgotten. I had put it away. And part of what I talk about in Odd Girl Out is the need for all of us to get in touch with our inner bullies. So I think it's important for women and girls to become more comfortable with their own capacity to be aggressive, and in turn I think that will promote a more healthy discussion of aggression.
The book is a product of 3 years of research. You've talked to literally hundreds of young girls, mostly between 10 and 14, and that it seems that this hidden aggression is of epidemic proportions. I mean, do you get any sense whether this is a problem that is growing or is just something that we didn't talk about in the past?
I think that the aggression might be increasing to the extent that we are putting more pressure on girls to achieve in the same ways that boys achieve, but again, not giving them the license to engage in the kinds of competitiveness and aggressions that they need to go the distance. So in other words, that creates a friction, I think, that pressure to achieve, and then that restriction that they don't feel that they can be overt about their aggression the way boys are, that may lead to a spike in the behaviors.
Let's talk about those, because you talk about the mixed messages that, especially that young girls get. You know, now, in modern times, they're supposed to be confident, assertive, yet they're really not allowed to confront anger in any kind of healthy way. I mean, what does that produce?
Well, I'll tell you, when I asked girls to tell me, I said a simple question. I said, when you guys are upset, when you're mad, when somebody's offended you, do you tell the person who's upset you? And overwhelmingly they said, no, I don't. And I asked why, and the responses were this. Well, she's going to be mad at me if I tell her. She's not going to want to be my friend anymore. She's going to turn everyone against me. I don't want to hurt her feelings. And really what the common denominator was they were afraid of losing their relationships. So I think the upshot of what I'm talking about here is that whereas Odd Girl Out started out being a book about bullying, it ended up being a book about everyday conflict in girls. It turned out that it wasn't just the protracted campaigns of cruelty that were the serious issues to deal with, but in fact the issue was that girls have a real problem articulating everyday conflict, and when they can't do that, when they fear that they will lose people in their lives, when they fear that conflict will terminate their relationships, they will resort to these very, I think, indirect and often very unfulfilling and worse aggressions.
And this, it seems to be a very important theme of your book, or a conclusion, that this ability to confront conflict is a very, very important part of getting out of this spiral of hidden aggression. Why so?
Well, it really is everything, because a lot of parents and teachers and girls themselves refer to girls' anger as being over stupid things. Girls say, well, we just fight, we have such drama over the dumbest things. Well, the problem is, the reason why the fights appear to be about stupid things is because often something very serious got passed over because someone was unable to talk about it. And I think were girls to feel more comfortable expressing what was in their hearts when it happened, at the moment it happened, and resolve the issue, they wouldn't end up festering, their anger wouldn't fester until it exploded finally over something stupid, then again leading to this whole issue of why are girls making such big deals out of little things. Girls often refer to wanting to be like the boys because boys can fight and have it be over with, whereas girls' conflicts tend to be protracted. They may last forever. Girls stop speaking to each other because they don't know how to resolve their conflicts.
Given how important relationships are, given that this fear of isolation is so profound among girls this age, and that there is this tendency to cling to relationships even if they're abusive, what kind of advice do you give to the girl who's being a victim, who's become a victim, who's being bullied?
What I tell parents is there's nothing you can do to make your child suddenly decide, okay, I'm not going to be treated this way. But what you can do is provide support for your child, and do not say to her, I told you not to hang out with that girl. I told you she was bad for you. I don't know why you're hanging out with her. You've got to, when you do that as a parent, when you say those things, you drive your child away. You force her into a place where she can't communicate with you anymore because she feels that what she's doing is punishable rather than something that's just painful and needs support.
Now, a lot of people write this kind of behavior off as this is just part of growing up. You know, it's bad, but no deleterious effects long term. You caution us that we shouldn't be viewing that you see this as the root of various behaviors in adulthood that are also destructive. Tell me about those.
Well, I think a lot of girls who engage in these behaviors, who are victimized by these behaviors, grow into women who do not trust other women, who avoid them in the workplace and in other environments, who aren't supportive of them. We often wonder, why is there no old girls network? And I think in part because there are a lot of odd girls out running around there with women's bodies who are afraid of other women and want to hurt them. I think also the research shows that these behaviors are associated with things like depression and self-mutilation, eating disorders, all kinds of pathologies that involve internalizing your negative feelings rather than externalizing them. When you don't feel like you can express your anger properly, you may become depressed because you're suppressing those feelings, or you may cut yourself rather than, again, externalizing your anger.
Above and beyond the obvious physical manifestation, I mean, I found it very interesting and thought-provoking that this kind of behavior eventually or over time may also deprive us of leaders.
Oh, yeah. That's
Tell
my
me about
favorite
that.
topic. Well, I run leadership camps in the summers for girls, and this is what I noticed, and what I came to really believe, is that when girls learn to claim power indirectly in their interpersonal relationships, they may very well grow into women who claim power indirectly in professional contexts. Likewise, girls who grow up believing that being competitive, openly competitive, or standing out, being quote-unquote conceited, or full of herself, girls who grow up that believing being that way is wrong will grow into adult women who become fearful of standing out and of bragging or of somehow competing to go far in the workplace, which of course are important elements of success in a leadership context. And so those people may want to become women who fade into the woodwork. So I think that in some ways there's a question for me is, are girls creating their own glass ceilings for themselves? Because it's very hard for me in 2002 to say, well, oh, this is the CEO's fault and he's a real jerk. I don't actually think that. I think there are a lot of CEOs out there of my parents' generation who want their women to be more aggressive, who struggle that their women aren't more aggressive, who want to help the bottom line of their company and who can't get them to be. So I think part of the answer now is to look at that intersection. How do women's interpersonal lives now in turn affect the way they operate at work? And that really, for me, is the next direction that I want to go in.
Rachel Simmons, I want to thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.